Hello, my name is Malin and I'm from Finland. And I'm about to present to you three narratives that are extremely influential in my own work and that I find very inspirational, not only in writing but almost in a philosophical type of way. It was quite difficult for me to choose because I have, there's so many different aspects you could think of when you consider what inspires you. So I decided to look on a little bit more focus on stories that prose-wise and writing style-wise inspire me. For me, writing is more than just telling a story. It's, the prose part is very important for me. It's like the wording, the structure, the rhythm. I really thrive on a good story that's told in a really, really beautiful way. And the first one of these is Neil Gaiman's The Sandman series, which is a comic or a graphic novel series. There's two here, and then I've got the rest of my shelf. There's 11 collected graphic novels, and then there's a new miniseries come out, and then there's countless of spin-offs, The Dreaming, can't remember the names of them all, and then the ones of the Witch, Thessaly, and Death as well. And what I like about Neil Gaiman's way of writing is just it's so profound in a way, and it draws so much inspiration from mythologies and things and underlying stories, and he kind of delves into fairy tales that already exist that we all know and kind of finds the sources of them and then like incorporates that into his own stories. And he writes in such a beautiful way. It's very simple but yet very intricate, very colorful, and he uses a lot of pauses in very important places, like in The Kindly Ones, which is my favorite of all these. The antagonist, if you will, she has a moment where she stares at mirror images of herself in the midst of her madness, and she just asks suddenly, "Excuse me, which one of you am I?" And they just respond, "Does it matter?" And in the image, she just leans her head towards the window and says, "No, it doesn't matter." And that's something that's, I don't know, lived with me ever since the first time I read the book. And then the second source of inspiration is slightly different from a comic book, but it's still in a sort of series format, is the show Roseanne from the late 80s to early 90s. Got like 9 seasons here, but if you do want to watch these, don't watch the 9th season because it's pretty disappointing. And the 8th season, a little bit, I don't know what's going on there. But the rest of the seasons are, I think they're fantastic. And again, writing-wise, they're completely opposite from Neil Gaiman because they're much more, well, not simpler as such, but it surrounds a completely different area. It's very much like working class families. They're quite aggressive towards each other. I suppose it's something that I relate to, not the aggressiveness, but, the working class background and being, not of the richest families around. But yeah, and it touches on a lot of subjects that are very important, and it's quite interesting to think that when, at the time wasn't really that much on comedy, especially on like a small TV show that was just half an hour long, that was on, I don't know, once a week. It touches on subjects such as homosexuality and domestic violence, and strong independent women, strong not independent women as such, married women, divorces for the older generation, and financial aspects, and you can study really hard to get into the perfect university, but it might be that you can't afford to go. I don't think there was that many shows at the time that really touched on these subjects, and they do. The characters are so, they're exaggerated. At least I would hope so. But there's, at the same time, they're very full-rounded characters. They have their own lives. You see them grow from being children, the children in the family, to being teenagers, getting married, having children of their own. And you see them go through depression, going through identity crises, and it's presented in a very sort of natural way. It doesn't try to be poetry. It doesn't try to be anything. It's just life happening on the screen in front of you. And it does it in a very powerful way, but in a very, because it's just like a half-hour comedy show, it's often very overlooked, I think. Like, when I talk about Roseanne to my friends, they just roll their eyes. But to me, it's a show that's really touched me in a lot of ways, and I think it's very bravely written and very bravely executed in a very successful way. And for my last source of inspiration used here is the book Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. I may have pronounced the name wrong, sorry about that. And it was made into a gorgeous, gorgeous film, so it's worth both reading and watching. The film is considerably longer than the book, but it still works. And it's the reason why I like it, why I like Palahniuk's style in the first place is just he's got a fantastic sense of rhythm. His stories, his writing style is almost kind of poetic, but it's so raw at the same time. It's very primal. And I chose this book for these three, well, this whole theme here is kind of different types of life philosophies, I think, in each one of these sources of inspiration. Where in Palahniuk's case, or in Fight Club's case at least, it's kind of achieving freedom through destruction. Not necessarily physical destruction, also emotional destruction, breaking free from bonds and chains and old habits in a very weird self-help type of way. And I just love the way he writes. There was somebody who shared a Chuck Palahniuk link earlier in one of the forums on his writing style, which I found very interesting, and I hadn't actually realized that this is actually the way he writes, even though I read his books like constantly. So that was quite fun, I thought. But yeah, it's worth looking into if you want to write in a really, really good way where you kind of get the reader to just get absorbed by the character rather than the reader absorbing the character. That's kind of how I see his style of writing. You kind of jump straight into the character's head. And what I do with books that I love that are full of fantastic quotations or ideas and thoughts or thought-provoking statements is I underline them. I only do this in my own books, mind you, not in anyone else's books. So if anyone ever lends me a book, don't worry, I will not draw in your book. And for example here, it says, one of the lines is, if people thought you were dying, they gave you their full attention, which I thought was quite thought-provoking and probably very true. And another one is, there are a lot of things we don't want to know about the people that we love, which I suppose everyone knows is true. And one of my absolute favorite ones is, the cancer that I don't have is everywhere now, which is just a short sentence that's a little bit weird, but I think it explains a lot and shows you a great insight into this character. And I think that everyone sometimes feels like, you know, there's a cancer that you just don't have, but you have, and it's just consuming you, and you're feeling desolate or desperate. At least that's how I think. So that was my 3 sources of inspirations after many weird takes, because I'm not very good on a camera, I've discovered today. So I hope you had the energy to actually follow through, and thank you if you did. Bye.